that great introduction. Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian from the Farnborough International Air Show outside London, and we're honored to have with us as our guest General Frank Gorenc, the outgoing commander of the U.S. Air Forces Europe. Sir, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
Talk to us, sir, a little bit. You know, when you took the job in August 2013, you've even joked that friends of yours said, hey, you're going to a kind of a quiet theater. But an enormous amount has happened in Europe. Obviously, in February 2014, there was the Russia's invasion of Ukraine. There was a stepping up. You had the Wales summit. And then, obviously, you have the campaign, the ISIS campaign, where your command is supporting it. Tell us, how the command has changed, how it thinks, and how it's operated in the few years that you've been there.
Well, I think you kind of began documenting what really happened. Early in 2014, the biggest thing on the plate was how we were going to transition Afghanistan from full combat operations to train, advise, and assist. By April of 2014, we were fully enmeshed in Crimea. We were fully enmeshed with the emergence of ISIS, and then on the African continent, we had Ebola come up as a challenge. And in each of those cases, the fundamental competencies of the United States Air Force had to be included in the response, and since then we've been busy.
Russia has been demonstrating its capabilities steadily. Its launch of missiles from the Caspian Sea against ISIS, we were less to do about fighting ISIS than demonstrating to Europe the capabilities of the Caliber missile. We've seen them display electronic warfare capabilities, mass strike capabilities. You lead the center that studies air power trends, and you're a lifelong airman. Talk to us about the capabilities Russia is disturbing that are particularly worrisome from our standpoint.
Well, I think that the capabilities that they've shown and demonstrated with respect to their operations in Syria in particular, I think the expansion of the A2AD environment all across Europe, from the Barents to the Baltics to the Black Sea to the Mediterranean Sea, demonstrate that their 2007 engagement, which was not a good engagement for them in the air, it clearly demonstrates that they put some money against it. They understand the capabilities that they need to get, and so the asymmetric advantage that we once enjoyed with some of the capabilities in our own air component have been narrowed to an extent, and whenever you have that narrowing, it is something to be concerned about.
You obviously talk to not only the defense leadership, the Air Force leadership, the joint leadership, as well as your successor who's going to take command soon. What are some of the things the United States has to do, whether it's developing new capabilities or thinking differently, to be able to counter the kind of capabilities that Russia is deploying?
Well, I think in this case, I would say we need to commit ourselves to being steady as she goes. Even before 2014, we had a very good program of modernization that is ongoing and is demonstrated here at Farnborough, with things like the F-35. We continue to work on our long-range strike B-21 bomber. We continue to work on our airlift capabilities and other improvements that will help us, integrate the fifth and the fourth generation capabilities that we have. We've obviously have a lot of training and exercises going on as part of the NATO assurance and deterrence things that we're doing all along the eastern side of NATO, and to fulfill the aspirations of the Warsaw Summit. And then, of course, we continue to invest in our people and make the necessary reforms that will allow us to continue to develop and nurture our airmen to get ready for future challenges. And so, in the end, we learned a long time ago that in order not to be a hollow force, there has to be a nice balance of modernization, of people improvements, and then, of course, enough operations and maintenance budget to keep everybody current. And I'm confident that we have developed a balanced force necessary to meet future challenges.
I was in a conference recently in Poland. It was a strategy conference, and there was a consensus there among Poles, but also a lot of Europeans, whether NATO was doing enough. Folks were noting we have a couple of aircraft and we have some units and some shoes and officers or boots on the ground, but largely, if you look at it from a Russian perspective, you have divisions on the border, triple-digit SAMs, cruise missiles that are nuclear capable, as well as aircraft that are in shelters in revetments, or hardened shelters. Are we doing enough in order, is the alliance doing enough to deter Russia?
Yes, I think the important part to remember is while we set on a course of adaptation, that up to this point you could say had been more ground focused. The fact of the matter is on the air component side of NATO, we've been at a very high readiness level for a long time, and we have a full set of radars, operations centers, aircraft that are on the very highest levels of alert that have been maintaining NATO airspace integrity for a long time. So that standing mission, in conjunction with the improvements that we made in ballistic missile defense, and clearly the result of Warsaw showed that we're going to an initial operational capability, which is an enormous achievement inside of an alliance like NATO. So the standing missions, the ballistic missile defense mission, and all of the other organizational improvements that we're making inside of NATO to adapt and to continue to make a joint force that's ready and responsive, along with the commitment of all of the nations to commit 2% of their budget, and within that 2% commit to 20% of modernization. And I thought, so again, I'm comfortable, with the holistic nature of the adaptation that we're doing. I think it includes organizational, technological, and other tactics, techniques, procedural changes that we're making. And so in the end, that with a persistent presence and an open display of what NATO is capable of is what we need to do. In addition to that, as you know, we've had the opportunity to introduce fifth generation aircraft, including the F-22 to Europe. And so, we're well on our way to making sure that at least on the air component side, that we are able to do our standing missions better and to integrate with the NATO response force reforms that are in the offing.
The key to deterring an adversary is understanding how they think and what are the pressure points they respond to. From your standpoint, how does Russia regard U.S. air power in Europe and U.S. air power in general?
Yeah, I think deterrence is really essentially a three-legged stool. It's capability, it's capacity, and willingness. From the air power perspective, I think they absolutely understand the capability of what fifth generation near zero miss technology, remotely piloted aircraft, a network enabled weapons, et cetera, et cetera. They understand that we enjoy an asymmetric advantage in capability. With respect to capacity, all of the air forces for the most part are downsizing, but as the Air Force is downsizing, they're making up for that with multi-role, unbelievably capable aircraft. And then, of course, there's willingness. That's not exactly in my wheelhouse, to talk about, but perception is reality in deterrence. And I think that the three-legged stool that we've set up with respect to capability, capacity, and willingness, which is really deterrence, it's well on our way. So I know they're looking over at our side, and I think that the message that we are ready to defend NATO is out there. And NATO's a defensive alliance. Everything we're doing is transparent. We've made it open to the Russians for our exercises, and we intend to preserve the integrity of the NATO alliance, and everybody fully understands the Article 5 Washington Treaty implications of that alliance.
A lot of our NATO allies are often criticized for not spending enough. From an air power standpoint, how do European air forces stack up?
Yeah, well, we have a full range of air forces. We have air forces that are, that are very, very capable. We have air forces that are in the early stages of development. but across the board, organized training, equipping, deploying, and employing the air forces, we're basically taking the strengths of each nation in their air component, putting it together in a smart way, and we're creating real capability across the 5 competencies that are expected from an Air Force: air and space superiority, ISR, rapid global mobility, strike, and the command and control to make all 4 of those pillars exponentially better.
Let's talk about airbase resilience for a moment.
Right.
The United States obviously, and NATO has a number of bases in the region. Does the United States have to move more assets, but also do more for greater airbase resilience to harden its bases and to adopt new operational concepts, given that part of the Russian battle plan is to try to take out every single base in Europe if they can?
Yes, basing is really very important, particularly for the air component. The fact of the matter is the airfield is basically where we generate combat power from. We take the defense of all of those bases seriously, and resilience is something, I guess I equate it to a mountain without a top. It just requires a matter of commitment. It's a matter of investment. It's a matter of tactics, techniques, procedures. It's a matter of practice. And then, of course, on our side, on the NATO side, we have a lot of airfields that are available to do combat operations from. And then, of course, some of the airfields aren't necessarily at the right state, but as operating locations, we certainly have demonstrated the capability to operate our A-10s off of unimproved airfields and even roads, for that matter. And so, we always think about it. It's a balance between investment, practice, and resilient, investments in resilient features for an airfield. But in the end, we do, inside of NATO, understand the value of a base and the importance of protecting it.
Speaking of bases, how soon before the Joint Strike Fighter is based in Europe, and where would it be based?
Well, we have made a decision, and we have selected Lakenheath to be the location for the first F-35s in Europe. Looking at about anywhere from 4 to 5 years. Although the project is starting already because we're preparing that base for a 5th generation capability, and so the bottom line is we're preparing Lakenheath to become a 5th generation airfield.
No place is going to have more F-35s than Europe, obviously, with the Italians, the Norwegians, the Danes, the Brits, the Turks that are going to be operating the jets. Are you guys, talk to us a little bit about how the community itself as a whole, as combat airmen, are thinking about how this capability is going to be used in the future?
Well, I'm absolutely thrilled at the program. The F-35 partners, the majority of them are European. And I think we've only scratched the surface at getting all that we can out of the aircraft that you see behind us. I think there's absolute opportunity for savings in training, savings in logistics, the sharing of tactics, techniques, procedures. I think the F-35 is going to do for NATO what the F-16 did for NATO those many years ago, and the interoperability allowed by an alliance that's flying the same equipment will go a long way to elevate, the capability of NATO with respect to the air component.
And one last question. NATO summit just ended in Warsaw. There was talk about more boots in the Baltics. There was talk about more naval presence in the Mediterranean. But some air power advocates say that there was not an air power clause of it. Why not? And should there have been a more direct statement about the use of air power?
Well, the SACEUR made a statement about that, and it's his full intent to flush out the NRF reforms in a joint way. We have been working to put the air component, factors into the NRF reforms, and we're well on our way to doing that. We don't talk about it a lot, but we're doing it. And then, of course, again, we have a large standing force structure, a large standing number of radars, aircraft, operation centers that every day are doing the mission as we speak. And that includes now a ballistic missile defense capability that is being manned 24/7, 365 with full capability. And so the combination of those standing missions and then the adaptations that we're making to the air component inside the NRF, I think are well on their way, and I'm completely happy with it.
And 10 seconds, what are you going to do next after more than 30 years in an Air Force uniform?
Well, I'm going to head to Virginia, and I'm going to work on getting 4-star rank with my grandchildren.
Sir, all the best. Fair winds following seas. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much.